The rooftop garden keeps its own small weather, river-cool wind, the faint antiseptic breath of the vents, glass rails returning sunset in thin amber strips. A girl lifts a scarred violin to her jaw, bow hair dusted with rosin, and the terrace forgets to exhale. At the far edge, where planter shadows pool, a man stands in quiet shadow, a dark silk scarf, round glasses. He doesn't lift a phone. He just listens. Her first line is spare and steady, a seam sewn into evening. Nurses slow at the doorway. A security guard half turns, pretending he isn't. Leaves in the olive pots answer with a dry whisper. She keeps the opening vibrato short, as if to say, "This is not a plea." The cardboard sign on a folding table shows a clean black QR, the title Rooftop Album, and beneath it, in careful hand, the sentence that's become her spine. Craft, not pity. Downstairs, the hospital hum waits like a tide. Fluorescents sand the world to pale. A doctor with careful eyes places numbers on the table that refuse to blink. One more round, medically wise, financially not. Insurance hit its ceiling last month. Her mother's hands fold over a leather bag whose strap carries a neat hand-stitched scar. That bag has been to every appointment, a quiet witness to the promise of savings slowly breaking. Middle class is a tightrope, and she has watched her mother stare at spreadsheets after midnight, watching numbers march off a cliff. In the hallway, above the water fountain, a faded poster shows a tuning fork and blue letters. Find your A. The paper is sunsoft, the fork bright as a small compass. She stands beneath it and hears the question with a weight instead of a mark. How do we pay? The answer cannot be begging. She chooses the only thing she can make with her hands that adds rather than subtracts. The violin in her case is second-hand, a second life saved by a careful hand years ago. It's the one thing she truly owns. She can carry it, tune it, and use it to sell her craft without selling her name. A phone mic, an hour of light, one take at dusk, a ledger written in sound. She writes the rule inside her breath and presses the elevator button with a knuckle that has learned to be steady. Back on the terrace, the city has warmed to copper. The QR sign squares to the table like a picture frame hung straight. The mic's red eye winks alive. Bow to string, heel to hair. The first phrase has a cleaner edge, as if choice itself honed it. Air moves. Glass sings back. Somewhere below, a cartwheel chirps. And the chirp arrives up here like a stubborn grace note. The man in the scarf shifts a degree closer to the rail, not enough to count as approach, enough to register as intent. A patient in a pale gown pauses at the threshold. IV pole like a slim companion, face lifted into the breeze the way people lift their faces toward a remembered lake. She does not change the piece to soothe him. She lets the piece remain what it is, and the honesty does the soothing. His mouth loosens. A real smile finds the lips' corner, the kind that appears when the body remembers how to exhale without guarding the exit. The terrace tilts around that small mercy and steadies. Her phone watches from the tripod, unblinking. The second phrase climbs and holds. The wind suggests a different tempo. She respectfully refuses. The note locks. She lowers the bow. The mic clicks its tiny stop. For a heartbeat, the city stands on one foot, testing balance. The nurse at the door steps forward and tilts her screen toward the QR. A soft payment chime answers, thin and bright as a coin on marble. A second chime follows from somewhere below. A watcher behind glass, perhaps, or a kid 2 floors down with good headphones. Small chimes, small coins, small breaths that add up. She wipes the rosin dust from her fingers with the hem of a cloth already lined with the work of days. Her phone vibrates. her mother's heart emoji, and a time for tomorrow's lab work. She writes 3 words in her notebook, block letters that keep her from drifting, craft, not pity. The man in shadow remains a negative space, shaped like attention. A dark silk scarf, round glasses, no phone, just listening. He tilts his head slightly, a pianist's reflex, a conductor's habit, then stills again. He could be anyone. He could be someone. The terrace keeps its small weather while the question grows under it. The guard and patient linger as the evening deepens. She resets her stand, then offers the nurse a simple, grateful bow before checking the battery for the next take. The poster downstairs keeps its blue instruction. Find your A. The terrace has heard its own A tonight. An older man's attention, tuned to discipline. A stranger's smile, tuned to relief. A pair of chimes tuned to hope with receipts. She doesn't call any of it a miracle. Miracles spend too fast. This is rate and rhythm, accrual and proof. She lifts the violin again just to feel the weight align with her collarbone, and the city permits one soft siren to pass. Somewhere inside, an elevator dings and opens to an empty floor. Somewhere else, a child laughs and then stops to listen. The day doesn't end. It simply hands itself to evening with care. If you believe dignity has a sound of its own, stay with us until the last A fades. She writes her rules where her bow hand will see them first. Not on a wall. On the inside lid of the case, above the velvet, beside the nicked chin rest that already knows her bone. 3 lines in black marker, square and clean. 1 piece, 1 take, every dusk. Speak of craft, not of illness. No alms, albums. The words settle like screws tightening a hinge. If a rule is a door, these are what keep it from rattling when the wind changes. She rehearses the ritual that makes the rules real. Rosin first. She draws the bow hair across it in slow passes until the faint dust blooms. A weather you can't see until it lands on black cloth. Then bow grip, thumbs soft but not sleepy, fingers curved like a promise. Shoulder low, jaw light. The small mechanics that keep music honest. She checks the bridge with her eye, sighting down like a carpenter. She breathes to the count of 4 and writes it down in her notebook so tomorrow she won't have to trust memory. Bar 12. Light bow pressure. On the table, she squares the cardboard. The QR sits there like a doorbell waiting to be rung. She writes a price that feels real, not desperate. She crosses out the word donation and writes album. She crosses out the word help and writes listen. Language is also craft. Tell them nothing they didn't ask, she tells herself, a rule inside the rules. If someone pushes for details, she will nod, thank them for listening, and point to the sign. Dignity pays its own bill. At dusk, she returns to the terrace before the first breeze rises off the river. The garden's 2 olive trees carry their quiet, silver-backed leaves like polite applause. She places the phone, tests the mic, and taps a metronome app once to feel its invisible click on her skin. Then she closes it. The rhythm will live in her wrist. The first take tastes like water from the right glass. She keeps the opening vibrato short again, the way a person keeps a secret safe by holding it correctly. The sound goes out into the copper light and returns, carrying a little of the world's warmth. The nurse appears at the door and gives a simple nod that spends no extra words. Somewhere behind her, a patient laughs at something on a television and then stops, as if the sound outside the sound surprised him. Her phone lies innocently on the table. When the piece ends, she taps stop. For a breath, there is only the hum of the building. Then the phone pings, bright, quick, undeniable. Payment received. She feels the smallest tilt inside her chest, as if a scale found its first gram and liked the weight. She doesn't smile big. She lets the corners of her mouth do what corners do. She writes the time in her notebook. She draws a box around it. She writes 2 words under the box, the ones the world won't see. Thank you. The rules hold. A volunteer in lilac scrubs asks, "What's the story behind your music?" Amari nods at the sign. "Rooftop album. 1 take each evening." The volunteer waits for the rest, but there is no rest, only the thing itself. The volunteer blushes a little, apologizes to no one, scans the code, and slips away. She plays a second piece only to herself, off the record, the way bakers make a loaf for the kitchen to taste. It is slower, more private. The shape of a thought that hasn't learned its public name. When it ends, she lets the bow hang in the space between her heart and the rail, as if measuring a distance she plans to cross. In her room, she lays out the tools again, cloth, rosin, notebook, case, and aligns them like little altars to a larger vow. The rules have already begun to narrow the day into hours that matter. It is easier to breathe when you know which breaths count. Near midnight, her phone lights the ceiling with its small square moon. Another ping. A second sale. Someone in the building the app suggests, or someone standing under the same sky. She imagines a listener behind glass, earbuds in, face softening at a line she held true. The thought doesn't inflate her, it steadies her. She closes the notebook and touches the 3 lines on the case as if checking a lock. 1 piece, 1 take, every dusk. Speak of craft, not of illness. No alms, albums. Craft, not pity, she says. Once aloud, so the room learns the sentence too. Then she sleeps like someone who has finally given the night a job. Evening lays a clean copper wash across the rooftop garden. Day 1 begins with small order. The folding table squared, the QR card unbent, the mic warmed by a thumbprint. Amari breathes to 4 and starts. The line holds steady. 2 nurses slow at the doorway, sharing the same pause. A man in street clothes drifts close for half a minute, as if retrieving a thought, and goes. When the last note thins, her phone gives a bright, quick chime. She bows to the air like it paid in full. Behind the glass, yesterday's patient finds a corner smile and keeps it. At the terrace edge, the older man stands where planter shadows pool, scarf dark, glasses round. No phone, no movement. Listening is the only action he takes. Day 2 brings a wind with opinions. It noses the QR card and teases her sleeve, but she keeps tempo in her wrist the way a lantern keeps flame. 3 teens cut across, bound to their screens. One glances up and says, "Nobody buys CDs," a sentence that wants to be heavy but lands like dust. Amari answers with form, short vibrato in the opening bar, a line drawn true. After the take, a nurse steps forward in quiet agreement and scans the code. The chime is thin and definite, a coin on marble. Out by the rail, the man in black is a fraction nearer than yesterday. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps intent. Then gone before anyone can test the distance. On day 3, the glass returns a warm echo. Amari tunes, checks the heel of the bow, and writes a small reminder, bar 12, lighter, before she plays. A woman with a stroller lingers at the door and pretends to adjust a blanket while the music does that other work it was born to do. The take lands clean. The security guard in the crisp jacket clears his throat like a prelude, buys a track for his wife, and leaves without ceremony. She notes the time in her book and draws a box around it, as if giving the moment a proper frame. At the margin, the listener remains, a silhouette made of attention. Day 4 sends something up from the city's lower floors. A balcony clip titled "Rooftop Violin Lullaby" finds its way to a community page, 40 seconds long. Enough to taste. Views tick without hurry, hundreds, then a quiet 1,000, and comments footstep in. Needed this tonight. Reminds me of my grandmother's radio. More, please. Mid-thread, someone quotes her sign exactly once, then turns it into a tag. The page repeats. She doesn't reply. She replaces the cloth on the strings, squares the QR card, and plays. Down on the terrace, a young orderly watches as if listening were a job and scans in a flustered exit, like someone who felt too much in public and didn't want to be caught. Day 5 gathers people the garden wasn't built to expect. Not a crowd, just a constellation, a therapist on break, a grandmother steadying 2 bodies with 1 patience, a kid with a shaved head who peeks, retreats, peeks again. Amari returns to the rule. 1 piece, 1 take. The wind behaves. The mic behaves. Her body behaves. At bar 12, she softens the bow, and the note lands exactly where she asked the air to hold it. The guard returns to buy a second track for later, which might mean for someone he can't say out loud. 2 more chimes find her phone, and a third arrives from a floor below she cannot see. Progress shows in small angles. Her shoulders have learned where to live between phrases. Her right hand holds a steady refusal to rush. Her left finds each note without apology and leaves it cleaner than it came. Between takes, she realizes she sets the QR card perfectly parallel to the table's edge every time. Order is a kind of courage. So is refusing to move the price. The teens return with a 4th, a girl who has quietly outgrown the other 3. She shushes them with nothing but a look and stays. The piece tonight lifts brighter in the middle, 1 click higher on the lamp. When it ends, the girl scans and tucks her phone away as if protecting a small flame from the wind. The boys have nothing to say, which is progress of its own. Through all of it, the man in the scarf has become a constant, the anchor weight at the corner of a page. He is never late. He never records. Once he removes his glasses, wipes them with the edge of the scarf, and sets them back with the care people give to tools that choose their owners. Once, he touches his right ear for a heartbeat and lets his hand fold back into the coat. He leaves before gratitude can find a target. By the week's end, the terrace knows a new pattern. Open door, wind, 1 take, 2 or 3 chimes, a nod from a nurse, a smile cut free from a stranger, a reflection that keeps its secrets. Amari packs with an inventory that sounds like prayer. Cloth, rosin, notebook, case. The case lid closes on 3 marker lines that hold when the wind changes. She does not narrate the distance left to cover. She measures it in pieces, played, and receipts that exist. The numbers downstairs have not moved, but something else has. The floor beneath them. Less tilt, more hold. On her way to the stairs, she passes a window that gives her back her outline, and the dark behind it. In the pane, the listening shape is already gone. Only the warmth remains, the way a chair remembers the last person who sat and cared enough to sit well. She lets the warmth follow instead of chasing it. Tomorrow is already waiting at the terrace door, a small job that belongs to her and no one else. Under a copper sky, the rooftop settles into its small weather, glass rails, olive leaves, the faint antiseptic drift from the vents. Amari opens the case and lays out her quiet ritual. Cloth, bow, rosin, notebook. She writes 2 reminders, bar 12, lighter, no rush. The hour is still hers. This week she learns how steadiness becomes visible. Not in speeches, in the way a line starts upright and stays that way, in how her right hand refuses to hurry when the ache presses, in the way she sets the QR card exactly parallel to the table's edge, as if accuracy could lend balance to everything else. The terrace keeps 2 constants, a kid in a pink knit hat at the glass, and a shadow at the far edge. Black turtleneck, charcoal coat, dark silk scarf, round glasses. Attention shaped like a vow. The first turn comes from below, and it looks like care with a tripod. Jorge, the community organizer who once shrugged and drifted off, returns with his shoulders squared and a camera leveled to the horizon. He measures light, then films a full take. That night, he posts it with a plain title, Rooftop Lullaby, and leaves the rest alone. No tragic punctuation, no bait. By morning, the clip walks on its own legs. 10,000, 20. Comments arrive like soft shoes on chapel stone. Held my breath for the first time today. Played this for my dad in recovery. More, please. Mid-thread, someone types the sentence from her sign, and others pass it hand to hand until the phrase sounds borrowed and true. The number in the folder does not change shape, but something in the air does. People know. That matters. The second turn arrives as a text from a friend whose help always looks like function instead of fanfare. Malik. Saw the clip. Can't help. Before lunch, he has built a storefront that behaves, no detours, no pity button. The album, the buy link, and a receipt that arrives without argument. He bikes over with a small condenser mic borrowed from the campus studio and tapes a note to the cord. You're not alone, but it's yours. She tests a scale against the evening wind. The sound returns with edges intact and no glare. Not fancy, just enough. With tools that cooperate, discipline feels lighter. She trims the opening vibrato again and hears the tone stand on its own feet. At bar 12, the bow pressure softens and the string accepts the kindness. The ache still visits. Fatigue still leans. But the line asks for breath, and she pays in breath. And that payment buys silence, the good kind, on the terrace. A few scans happen without ceremony. A folded note appears at the table's edge. For pediatrics, no signature. She places it in the case and writes the time in her book. She does not count out loud. She counts what matters. The hospital answers next, not with a parade, but with small, quiet changes that add up. A guard sets 2 cones, and people step around them without complaint. A charge nurse shifts a changeover by a few minutes, and the door stops slamming during the opening bar. A housekeeping cart pauses at the end of the rail, and the wheels learn how not to squeak for 3 measures. None of this is announced. Rituals don't need memos. They need repetition. The rooftop becomes, briefly, a room that understands music. Still, the math is blunt. Sales have risen. Views have climbed, support is real, and yet the total remains a mountain with its own weather. She writes, keep pace, 1 piece, 1 take, every dusk. The words feel less like insistence now and more like a keel. The email arrives at midweek with a formal, kind tone. Subject, terrace clearance, Friday 6 hours p.m., 15 minutes, safety parameters attached. Thank you for being considerate of staff flow. She reads it twice. This is not a rescue, it's a lane. Permission. She taps the calendar. The square goes blue. The mountain remains, but now there is a stare. News travels by whisper. Jorge replies with a second tripod emoji and no exclamation mark. Malik drops a link to pre-orders that actually confirm. The kid in the pink hat presses both palms to the glass and grins as if invited to a secret with a start time. Amari keeps her eyes on the work. Less vibrato, more spine. The opening stands straighter each night like handwriting finding itself. She drinks 2 fingers of water and returns the bottle to its exact ring on the table. The ache lifts its head, and she lets technique answer on her behalf. Weight rolled from heel to middle. Elbow quiet, jaw light. The phrase crosses the gap and lands clean. The angle of a shoulder relaxing. The stillness of a face that had been managing all day and, for 2 minutes, does not. The way the glass stops being a barrier and becomes a resonator. The way the wind, for once, agrees to be a metronome instead of a thief. He is present for all of it. The man in the scarf remains in his familiar shadow. He never lifts a phone. He never interrupts. At the exact instant she tests a single straight, unadorned note. He tilts his head a half degree, the smallest signal a musician can give, and then stills, as if acknowledging a choice made correctly at the right time. She lowers the bow and lets the last vibration fold into the rails. She closes the case. Cloth, rosin, notebook, mic. A few hands approach and scan without talk. She places the folded note for pediatrics beneath the shoulder rest. She pockets the cord Malik loaned her. She checks the calendar again, though she doesn't need to. Friday 6 p.m. stands there like a small lamp lit at the end of a hallway. On the terrace, the man in the scarf lingers one beat longer than usual, and then turns, neither fast nor slow, into the ordinary corridor. He leaves nothing behind but a measure counted correctly. Amari takes the door with the steadiness of someone who will return. The rails give the night back in patient lines. The ache will come. She will play anyway. The total is still high. She will play anyway. She touches the case lid where 3 black lines hold when the wind changes and thinks the sentence that keeps the hinges quiet. Craft, not pity. Then she carries the hour with her, and the hour carries her back. Wind arrives wrong. Not the kind that cools, the kind that lifts paper and pries at the hand. Her first long note, tears in the middle, a clean split she can feel in her wrist. The terrace hears it too. Amari lifts the bow, resets breath. One piece, one take, every dusk. The rule stands even when the weather laughs. She tries again. Less vibrato, more spine. Hair against string, string against air. Friction says it's truth. The line staggers, then stands. Not pretty, honest. Her phone stutters. The payment page spins, stalls, fails. 2 would-be buyers tilt wrists, then lower them with the practiced disappointment of people who know networks lie. "We'll try later," someone says to no one. Later doesn't pay the invoice whose due date just turned red in her mother's folder. The take ends in a smaller silence. The wind pockets it and moves on. She wipes the strings, checks battery, and finds the worst truth, storage full. The screen blushes apology. She deletes last week's best take, feels the loss like a small theft, and saves tonight's file. The red light turns honest. She breathes and begins a second piece, even though the first felt like a wall. A passerby stops, glances at the sign, and flings a sentence he's rehearsed for years at whatever young art is within reach. "If you were any good," he says, "not loud enough to be brave, you'd be on a real stage." It lands where such sentences land, aimed at the rib that protects the breath. For one beat, her hands want to defend her instead of play. She doesn't argue. She rewrites the piece mid-air. Lullaby for night shift nurses. Bow nearer the bridge, tone thinner, vibrato nearly gone. The glass edge cuts clean without bleeding. Halfway through, the wind remembers how to be a metronome. The man with the sentence leaves before the line ends, which is its own verdict. A hand appears at the threshold holding a printed album sleeve. QR art, someone made from the site, because paper still feels like proof. "Would you sign it?" a patient asks, voice rusty but willing. A borrowed ballpoint. She signs first and last name, the way you sign taxes and instruments. Ink plain, therefore right. After, her palm rests a second on the case lid where 3 black lines live. They hold. The next day is not kinder. The wind eases. The inbox sharpens. Billing reattaches the same number in a new font, as if typography could raise funds. At dusk, the link stumbles again when the network crowds. The phone repeats its warning. Memory is a door with fewer hinges than she needs. She deletes a video of her mother laughing at something small, then steps back from the table to remember why she is doing any of this. She returns, because returning is the job. She sets the QR card exactly parallel to the table's edge, straightness in small things, teaching large things where to stand. The first piece asks for her softest jaw and gets it. The second asks for breath and receives 3 counts instead of 4. The third, added by need, not plan, starts low on the G string and climbs with the patience of someone who knows stairs by name. Between second and third, her mother texts a photo of an envelope corner where a date glares like a flare. Words rise in her thumb and do not leave. She types only the time she'll be home and a heart she rarely uses. Then she plays. A cluster of sales finally works, some carrier remembering its job. Shoulders drop, eyes soften, proof without noise. Not enough to order medicine, enough to keep form intact. She notes the time, draws a bracket, lets it be 1 line in longer math. Then the message appears from an unknown number. 3 words, no signature. Keep your bow straight. She stares long enough to hear it by ear instead of eye. Not a scold. A note you give a colleague right before the downbeat. The text carries the exact shape of the gap she fights each evening when wind leans her hand the wrong way. She glances to the far rail. Black turtleneck, charcoal coat, dark silk scarf with its faint pattern, round glasses. He stands exactly where he has stood all week. No phone, no gesture, attention shaped like a vow. The message glows on her screen like a tuning fork struck at A. She accepts it as if the air itself spoke. Closing line, arm level, wrist a hinge, shoulder a patient witness. The note goes out and returns, standing on both feet. After, the kid in the pink hat gives a thumb that is relief, not ceremony. A folded bill hides under the edge of the sign. Its owner is gone. Amari touches the case lid again and feels steadiness answer from wood and rule. Another evening, another set of frictions. A gust peels at the QR and she weights it with rosin. The mic cable loosens. She seats it with a turn that clicks. Her fingers tingle, then numb, then learn sensation again because work asks. She renames the second piece silently, for the ones who stay late, and keeps the opening spare. Less vibrato, more spine. The line stands. It shakes once. It stays. When she finishes, the silence is the right size again, not empty, held. She closes the case. Cloth, bow, rosin, notebook, and the latch makes the proper sound. The mountain remains. The ache leans. The link will fail again and work again and fail again. But Friday's lane is marked on her screen, and an unsigned sentence has joined her rules like a 4th line written where only she can read it. On the way to the door, she types nothing back. She keeps the message open for the length of the hall, then locks the phone as if saving the note in bone would be safer than saving it in glass. At the stairwell, she checks her hand and finds it straight. Then she takes the steps down, counting, not the dollars left, not the names to call, but the beats between now and tomorrow's dusk. The day bends early. Forecasts promise calm. The wind keeps its own math. By late afternoon, the rooftop gleams with that thin brightness people mistake for mercy. Amari lays out the ritual anyway. Cloth, bow, rosin, notebook, QR, 1 piece, 1 take, every dusk. She begins with the line she trusts. The note leaves clean, then wobbles as if the air changed its mind. When the last bar settles, there is no chime, only the antiseptic breath of the vents. Her phone stays blank. A comment climbs into the feed. Drama for dollars. Another. Nice pity play. She answers neither. She trims the opening of the next piece until vibrato is a rumor and plays. Mid-phrase, the mic cable loosens. A hiss eats the tail. She stops. The error light stays bright. Between failures, her mother's text lands like a stamp, a photo of an envelope. Final notice across the window, a date clean as a blade. Her mother adds nothing. She never does when the number sharpens. Amari flips the phone face down. The second take begins low, wooden, narrow as a hallway. It refuses her hand twice, then accepts it. Halfway through, the wind chooses to be difficult and wins. By the end, the terrace has collected nothing but breath. She stops filming. She sits on the bench by the planters where the soil keeps a little heat. The violin lays across her knees like a tired animal. She writes without decoration. No sales. Link failed twice. Cable hiss. Then a line under the lines. Tomorrow. Need 12. The number feels absurd and necessary in the same breath. She wants to explain herself to the air, to the rail, to whatever keeps Ledger up here. The rules answer for her. Speak of craft, not of illness. She copies the sentence onto the edge of the QR card again, for the craft, not the cause. Because ink can be posture when posture shakes. Small mercies arrive disguised. The security guard kneels by the outlet with a short orange extension and a strip of gaffer tape. He doesn't ask. He seats the plug until it clicks and tapes the cable so feet won't lift it again. The nurse who always pauses on her way to nights finds the rosin cap under a chair, wipes it, and sets it by the sign. Neither stares. Both act. The terrace feels tended. Evening drains its color and leaves the lines. The listening silhouette is in place, charcoal coat, round glasses, where the shadow chooses to stand. He is unmoved by victory or failure. He attends to form. When she tests a naked A, he tilts his head a half degree and stills. Not praise. Recognition that the note existed and carried its weight. She tries one last take, short and spare. The bow is a measure, the arm a rule. The phrase holds like a bridge drawn to exact length. No one scans, no one claps. The proof is only in the wood finishing its vibration without apology. She lets it end, lowers the instrument with both hands, and cleans the strings with a cloth that knows the weak. Inside, the waiting room hums with vending machines and tired televisions. Amari sits where the light is least surgical and opens the notebook again. She writes the sentence that sounds like a dare and a promise. Tomorrow. Need 12. Then she signs beneath it as if co-signing with herself. She folds the QR card and rewrites the mantra along the edge where thumbs will rub it smooth. For the craft, not the cause. The comment feed still gnaws when the phone wakes. She deletes nothing. Words will lose their shape by morning. A janitor pushes a broom in long, patient strokes. That hush of bristles is the only applause the day earns. She watches the floor become itself again and learns something steady from that. When she rises, the weight returns to the right places. Cloth, bow, rosin, notebook, case. She checks the cable and seats it until the click arrives. On the way out, she passes the taped lane and the straightened chair. The terrace is ready for someone who believes in it. At the stairwell, she lifts the case just high enough to clear the first step. 1, 2, 3. She counts beats instead of bills. The ache follows. Doubt follows. The door seals behind her and the night keeps its weather. Tomorrow waits where dusk waits. She will meet it with a bow held straight. If you've ever stood at the edge of giving up, stay through the next note. Sometimes hope doesn't shout. It hums, quietly, until we answer. She does not sleep so much as bargain with the dark. 3 times she opens the caption to explain, and 3 times she deletes the words. Twice she lowers the price, watches the number blink, then restores it. Once she almost adds a second take, then sits on her hands until the urge passes. By morning, the sentence on the QR edge is still there, steady as ink. For the craft, not the cause. She makes changes that are not betrayals. Storage cleared, cable replaced. A small checklist taped inside the case. 12 slow bows on open strings to teach the day patience. Bar 12, lighter, spoken once so the room remembers. She texts Jorge, one clean angle, no narration. Malik. Storefront holds? Pre-orders okay? Both replies arrive before noon like tools clicking into place. The sky lifts into copper over lavender. People return, purposeful. A few staff on 5-minute air, 2 classmates, and the kid in the pink knit hat pressing a Teddy's ear to the glass. Even the wind hums time instead of taking it. She tunes by ear. The opening is trimmed, vibrato short, the line clean. At bar 12, she lets weight fall through the bow, then lifts. The string accepts the kindness. The tone stands and stays. Her arm feels like an instrument rather than an argument. 3 sales happen as if on cue. A wrist tilt near the door, a scan at the rail, another from the hall window. No chimes, just 3 shoulders settling. Jorge's link follows. Live now. Caption plain. Malik. Pre-orders confirmed, checkout smooth. Something unlocks. Range returning. Midway through the second piece, the light turns generous. Glass becomes water. She keeps the line narrow and upright, a beam that must hold. Breath steadies, time behaves. He is here. He has always been here. Tonight he does a new thing, which in his language is thunder. As Amari sustains a note that asks the air to keep its promise. The man in the scarf steps 1 pace into the edge of light and stops, not close enough to share air, close enough to change it. He tilts his head a fraction as if aligning 2 stars only he can read, then returns to shadow. Nothing else. Everything else. She starts a third piece she almost cut. Low G, a measured climb, the sound of someone taking stairs on purpose. At bar 12, she eases pressure again and hears the phrase cross without catching. The kid taps the teddy once, then leaves its ear to the glass. A classmate wipes her eye, surprised by how air can weigh less so suddenly. After, Amari drinks 2 fingers of water, sets the bottle back in its ring, and watches the crowd do the quiet arithmetic of staying. More bodies than yesterday, more stillness, less fuss. A small envelope appears face down at the table's edge. No name, just wait. She tucks it beneath the shoulder rest. What changes tonight is not triumph, it is tilt. The week's math does not transform, the mountain does not kneel, but the floor under it levels by a degree. Tools cooperate. People return. The hour keeps its shape in her hands. She lowers the bow. The terrace finishes the syllable of sound. She closes the case and does not feel smaller closing it. Friday, 6 p.m. glows in her calendar like a star that kept its place. At the far edge, the listening silhouette remains 1 beat longer than usual, then is gone in the decent way of people who know when a room belongs to its echo. On the way to the door, she passes the glass and catches herself twice, once as shadow, once as musician. The difference is not the violin, it is posture, it is choice, held long enough to become form. She walks toward the stairwell steady, not because the path is easier, but because it is chosen. The terrace holds its breath for Friday. Wind behaves like a metronome. Glass rails return the hour in copper strips. Amari checks the checklist. Storage cleared, cable seated, levels set, and writes a title on her notebook. Lullaby for the unknown listener. She does not look toward the shadow. Not yet. People gather purposefully. Jorge has the tripod leveled. Malik, near the door, tests the storefront one more time. A nurse stands back so her badge won't flash. The kid in the pink knit hat presses a teddy's ear to the glass like a stethoscope. The sky turns generous. The city forgets to be loud. She tunes by ear. One take. One line to hang the evening on. The opening is spare, a seam through air. At bar 12, she lets pressure float and rises from it. The string accepts the mercy and stands. The melody is true north, no bravado, no apology. When the last phrase asks for trust, she gives it her breath. Silence arrives. Then the shadow moves. He steps one pace into the edge of light. Black turtleneck, charcoal coat, dark silk scarf faintly patterned, round glasses, a silver band thin as a staff line. In his hand, a tuning fork A440. He taps it once on the rail. The roof answers. The A rings, a straight wire through air. He nods once, not to her face, to the form she kept. He places a long envelope on the table, gentle, as if paper should learn manners. Amari looks, but does not touch. The envelope stays closed like a door that knows it is important. A pen appears, black, matte, a fountain nib that shines only when it must. He signs the QR sleeve in a narrow hand, for the craft, not the cause. Beneath it, smaller, both instruction and care. Reduce bow pressure at bar 12. Something in her recognizes him before her mind does. The angle of the head when he listened. The patience in the wrists. A poster shard from years ago. A master class on TV, an orchestra rising when he entered. The realization staggers her. She has played to this man in her head since 12. She is playing to him now. Her breath miscounts. The number on the check pushes it further out of reach. She slides the envelope open and sees enough zeros to hold the last round, and the breathing space after. Shock is not a gesture. It is a pause applied to the body. She looks up. He has not moved away. He is present the way a downbeat is present. Quietly ruling time. The crowd feels it before they name it. A woman covers her mouth. A resident's eyebrows climb. The kid taps the teddy's ear as if it can hear the A still hanging. A young man near Jorge searches his memory. Isn't that? The question becomes a current. Phones rise and hesitate. Someone whispers the caption that will travel faster than context. Maestro at the hospital? Warmth moves through the terrace like a front. Purchases happen without theatrics. Wrists tilt. Screens glow. Shoulders loosen. Jorge's lens finds the tuning fork resting against the rail and catches its last shimmer. Malik's phone buzzes and he does not check it. He watches Amari instead. The maestro caps the pen and sets it beside the sleeve. He does not say his name. He looks at the violin the way luthiers look at wood, and at her bow hand with something like respect. Then he steps back one pace, returning to the line where shadow begins, leaving light where he found it. Questions arrive as they should, in minds that know how to keep wonder intact. Is he ill? Visiting someone? Why this roof? This evening, this song that speaks like a letter you did not expect? The answers are none of ours. What is ours is the sound the A made, and the envelope that lets a young musician finish what medicine began. Amari finally finds speech, and it is not a speech. Thank you, she says, the way you thank form that held when everything else tried to scatter. She signs one program, then another, her hand steady enough to pass for calm. She tucks the envelope into the case under the shoulder rest, as if money and craft should learn to share a house without shouting. The terrace exhales. People move in that soft way that means they will carry the story more carefully than they received it. Phones rise at last, but the moment for proof has passed. What remains is witness. Someone posts the caption. Someone else posts the A. The clip climbs the first rungs of its life online. She turns to the notebook and writes what matters in small letters. Friday, A440, envelope. Then the line that keeps tonight from becoming a museum. Practice. Reduce pressure at bar 12. She glances at the rail. The tuning fork lies where the light still remembers it. When she looks up, the shadow is gone, the corridor ordinary, the garden itself. And yet nothing is ordinary. The roof feels like a room with a new door where a wall used to be. She closes the case, the latch giving the clean click that sounds like permission. She carries the instrument the way you carry something that saved you back, and the city remembers how to be quiet while she walks. The terrace fills before the hour, a breathing mosaic of scrubs and street clothes, clipboards and cardigans, faces that have learned how to hold quiet. Cones mark a clean lane. The door opens and closes without slamming. Jorge has the tripod leveled. Malik checks the storefront once, then pockets his phone like a promise. The kid, in the pink knit hat, presses the teddy's ear to the glass and whispers something only the bear is allowed to hear. Amari arrives with the instrument held the way a truth deserves to be carried. The evening is copper over blue. A soft wind agrees to be a metronome. She places a small silver tuning fork beside the mic, A440, letting it catch the last light like a sliver of moon. This piece, she says, voice low enough to trust, is for the one who listened all the way through. She does not say his name. She does not have to. She tunes by ear. The room, which is not a room, becomes one anyway. The opening line is narrow and upright, a seam laid true. Vibrato short, like restraint held well. At bar 12, weight floats through the middle of the bow and lifts. The string accepts the mercy and stands. The sound is taller than she is. It does not apologize for occupying space. It walks to the glass rails and returns with the city folded inside it. Phones rise and stay still. Even proof knows when to wait. Midway, the terrace leans into the phrase. The kid presses the teddy harder to the pane, as if the bear itself were listening. Jorge's lens finds the tuning fork resting against the rail, catching the air as if the A were still hanging between notes. The melody climbs with a patience the weak taught her. It doesn't perform courage, it does it. Her right hand is a level. Her left is a map. The ache arrives late and is told to take a number. The line asks for breath. She gives it her own. The terrace holds. When the final note lets go, she does not move. 1 second, 2. The silence isn't empty. It is the room finishing the sentence with her. Then applause finds the air, not wild, but full. It begins at the rail and rolls inward. A nurse laughs, allowing breath back into the air. A man wipes his eyes. The kid simply bounces. The line forms on its own. Wrist tilts. Screens glow. The storefront does not stumble. Purchases stack without noise. Shoulders drop like curtains closing on worry. A folded envelope appears with a note for pediatrics, then another with no note at all. Jorge lowers the camera the way you lower a flag. Carefully, grateful to have witnessed. Her phone vibrates with a message from the hospital app. She has learned to dread. She glances because the day has already decided its weather. The text is short enough to be believed. The remaining amount has arrived. Final round confirmed. For a heartbeat, all the weeks crowd into the same second. The body asks to weep. She declines for later and smiles instead, the kind that fits her face without asking permission. Micro-victories continue. 2 more scans, a nod from someone she has never met. A paper program slipped forward to sign. An elderly man asks, "What do you call that last piece?" She answers, "Lullaby for the listener." and the word listener does a small, private miracle in the crowd. People look at one another as if the title were newly theirs. A young producer from a rooftop festival steps close, card already in hand, eyes bright with the kind of appetite that has read the room. "We open with sunrise sets," she says, "but we need a dusk. You're the dusk." There are dates. There is a stage without apology. There is pay. Amari accepts the card like a musician, not a patient, like a worker, not a wish. A reporter and a photographer appear together, soft-shoed, badges tucked away so the hospital won't bristle. The question comes the way all questions come. Eventually, do you know who he is? The camera is polite. The lens is sure. She thinks of the tuning fork, the envelope, the pen's thin hand. Of the head tilted a fraction at the right note. Of posters and broadcast orchestras and a childhood Saturdays when brilliance arrived through speakers too small to hold it. She lets air settle before she answers. "A listener," she says. "A maestro." The reporter waits for more. She does not give it. Some gifts are better unnamed. The photographer takes one picture of the fork against the rail. It looks like a relic and a tool at once. She plays a short reprise, a grace note for the people who arrived late. The opening is trimmed again, vibrato brief, bar 12 merciful. The phrase lands clean. When it ends, the silence fits like a coat sewn for her shoulders. The corridor calls the room back to itself. She closes the case, and the latch answers like a friend. Cloth, bow, rosin, notebook, mic. The checklist loses a line, the one about storage, and gains a different one. Thank the ones who held the hour open. On the way to the stairs, her phone buzzes again. The hospital finance portal confirming what the app already said. She forwards the message to her mother with a single word at the top, "Done," and adds a heart she uses rarely and means. A second buzz. The festival's follow-up with dates in clear text. She writes them into the notebook before they become myths. She passes the glass and sees herself twice, shadow and musician. The difference is not the zeros in an envelope. It is the angle of her jaw and the way her spine knows where to live. At the far edge of the terrace, there is no silhouette tonight. Or perhaps there is one that knows when to leave rooms to their echo. People begin to drift. Careful not to break the hour's spell. The kid in the pink hat salutes with the teddy. Jorge packs the tripod like a witness. Malik squeezes her shoulder once and says nothing. Amari breathes and finds that breathing has stopped costing extra. She taps the tuning fork lightly against the rail. The A blooms, pure, unadorned, exact. She brings it close to the bridge and lets the violin catch the pitch, not to tune, but to remember. Then she carries the instrument toward the stairs, the way you carry a door you have learned to walk through, knowing the room it opens into is already waiting with its own silence. She keeps a ritual and lets it keep her. Before each set, Amari taps the tuning fork against the rail. The A blooms, plain, exact, and she brings it to the bridge so the violin can drink the pitch. "Find your frequency before you speak to the world," she says, and the terrace settles into listenable air. Weekends become a practice of abundance. The rooftop series returns as a rhythm. Dusk, one takes, a lane held open, a city that remembers quiet. What began as bills turns outward, scholarships for second-hand instruments, rescued wood for first voices. A small brass plaque on the wall reads, "What the hour has proven. Craft, not pity." She learns to teach without losing grace. The kid in the pink knit hat, braver now, cap traded for fuzz, stands with a school violin tucked under a chin that has learned where to live. The first note wobbles, then finds the rail. Amari waits one beat, then two. again from bar 12. Lighter, she says, and shows it with a bow hand that remembers a corridor of nights. The second try stands upright and holds. Faces change, posture remains, nurses on quick air, neighbors who heard about a sound that makes rooms behave, students who need proof that discipline is a word for hope. Amari keeps the opening spare, vibrato short, tone upright. She thanks with the work, not with speeches. The city keeps its small promise. For 15 minutes at a time, it knows how to listen. One evening, after a set that lands like a prayer left open, she turns to the folding chairs. On the back rail of the last row waits a dark silk scarf stitched with a faint music of dots. No note, no signature. Only fabric learning the shape of the chair, the way a shadow learns the wall. She understands without touching it. Some recognitions are best worn by air. Signings follow, quiet as rain. She uses a matte black fountain pen, the nib making a thin, confident line. For the craft, not the cause, she writes, and the sentence looks at home on every sleeve. Jorge's tripod now carries interns. Malik tends the page so strangers can find the sound that found them. Funds go where they promise to go. The ledger breathes like something human again. There are stages now and rooms without stages that matter more. A festival roof at dusk, a school gym that smells like polish and sneakers, a ward where the beeps lower their voices on request. Before every performance, she listens for the A, then for the hush after it, the twin doors of any honest speech. The body keeps a few aches. The hand holds steady. Not every miracle is loud. Sometimes an attentive ear sets our frequency right. If this story has found your pulse, share it with someone searching for their own A, someone who needs proof that one note, held with care, can teach the room how to listen.